one of the arms of government which houses the people's representatives is the Parliament of Uganda. And of course, it is referred by many as the temple of democracy. And whereas the country continues to grapple with issues of corruption, we take an in-depth analysis of, in the temple of democracy, what is the extent to which corruption has befallen our, institution. And to put all this into perspective, viewers, this morning is a panel of distinguished citizens of Uganda. My name is Kidega Moses, and I'm stepping in for your host, Harris Akamprira. But well, I'll just introduce our guests right away. To my immediate left is a gentleman from Uganda People's Congress, an ideologue, and also a media personality by the names of Joseph Ochieno. Joseph, we are happy to have you. Welcome.
Good to be here this morning.
Yeah. Thank you. From Soroti district is its former woman member of parliament, the Honorable Angelina Osege. Hope that is correct, Honorable. We are happy to have you this morning.
Thank you so much. Good morning, viewers. It's nice to be here.
The leader of the Uganda Parliamentary Press Association is Sam Ibanda Mugabi, who joins us equally on the show this morning. Sam, we are happy to have you.
Thank you, Moses. Good morning, our viewers, and good morning to the big panel. This is a big panel. I was with the Honorable Angelina in the 9th and 10th Parliament, and I'm also happy to be joined by this comrade from Uganda People's Congress.
Yeah.
I know UPC has issues, but I know he's one of the clean politicians in UPC.
He stands tall above the issues.
I was wondering whether, but he's one of the clean politicians in UPC.
He stands tall above the issues. Well, that's a good icebreaker.
Yeah.
Honorable, because you've been there as a legislator, just allow me to start with you. And as we talk about corruption in the country, yes, let's look at Parliament in itself. To what level has corruption entrenched itself in our August House?
Moses, that is a very broad question to answer in a few seconds, but I'm sure it's not news, really, that people are crying out that there is corruption in Parliament. There are issues. And there are so many ways that we can say that corruption has eaten up or has invaded the temple of, what did you call it?
Democracy.
Temple of democracy. I hope it is. Because at least for the 10 years that I was there, the same stories were going around. The same committees were being accused. And actually, one time I chaired, I think it was in the 10th Parliament, I chaired the Public Accounts Committee before it was divided, Public Accounts Committee, Central Government. And I had issues. Because you get this Auditor General's report, and the report is so bad, then the entity that is on whom the report, who has been reported on, will go all the lengths to try and get some members on their side as you look at the report, as you make recommendations, as you scrutinize the issues. And it has always been a problem. Agencies tend to get mercenaries within members of parliament to stand for them, even when they see that things are wrong. But because they have been hired, and they will do the bidding of they say the one who hires calls the tune. The one who pays the piper calls the tune. It's a very embarrassing situation because I think members of parliament are one of the most highly paid in this country. And to hear such things being done by people who are supposed to be honorable, it's disheartening. It's disheartening, it's painful, it is embarrassing. You feel like you don't want to belong. Because once it is there, you cannot get yourself out and say, here, look, me, I'm clean. It is about the institution. So it is, but it is not something that is isolated, that we can talk about only parliament. It is a national thing. Because when these things happen, sometimes they happen in ways that we tend to ignore. You think it is not corruption, but actually it is. When you go to a restaurant, you have paid money for a meal, but you have to give a tip. And it's almost becoming a normal thing. If you don't give a tip, next time you don't get a good service. That is corruption. It has its roots in corruption. When you talk about having to appreciate somebody for a service they offer, for which a taxpayer pays them, and then you, who is a beneficiary of the service, you are supposed to appreciate them. That is corruption in itself. So we have made corruption so normal that it has become like an extra source of income for Ugandans, for people who are working in any one place. There was even a time I was told in Parliament you could not get coverage by these friends of ours if you didn't give them something. You know, it has gone to levels that are so bad that if you are not corrupt, you are an exception. You are looked at as
alien.
Alien, yeah, right. You are looked at as an alien, and that is a dangerous thing for a country.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sam. Let me just come to you, and if you hear the Honorable, the way she puts it out, is that corruption has gone as deep as the committees of Parliament. But in the time that you've covered Parliament and its operations, let's talk about the incidents that have been contentious. For example, the passing of the 2017 age limit law or the amendment, then the 2005 term limit. I mean, how did corruption manifest in such contentious issues? Was it there anyway?
Thank you,
I was
Moses.
a victim of 2017.
And good enough on a level is here. She will confess whether it's true. In 2017, during the presidential age limit, whether some members of parliament received, because what I know, not all, as it is being alleged that received. I also heard from some members of parliament saying that some members of parliament who received 100 million shillings to make sure that they passed the age limit. But she will confirm. Since by that time she was there, she will tell us whether it's true. But I want to inform our viewers that Parliament, like another institution, I think corruption is everywhere. You go to judiciary, they will tell you what the judges are going through, what the people are appearing before these courts of justice are going through, how lawyers are treating even their clients and so on. You go to the local governments, they will tell you to get a job in these districts. Unless you pay, you cannot get a job at these districts or in these districts. You can even pay and then they refuse to give you a job. There are stories we have done where there's a district in Eastern region. I don't want to mention the name of the district. But the LC5 had planted different agents in different areas. Whenever they advertise for jobs, those agents would go and collect money from the different applicants. And the guy could collect millions and millions of money from these applicants. And at the end of the process of the interview, the guy could be in millions, 200 million, 500 million from these guys. But remember, there are only 10 jobs that have been advertised. Now you have collected money from 1,000 people. You tell me, who is going to be there to benefit from these jobs that have been advertised? But getting back to Parliament, as I've covered Parliament, I've had a number of rumors. I don't want to confirm them unless the institutions of government that are mandated to investigate and then prove comes out, which they have not done a number of occasions. Rumors have been there that in committees of Parliament, some members of Parliament go and solicit money from some accounting officers. It's a story that has been there. And I've also heard from the presiding officers mentioning and warning members of Parliament over the same. I remember when Honorable Angelina was chairing the Public Accounts Committee Central, she had a member on that committee who is alleged that she went to one of the accounting officers to solicit money from that accounting officer to make sure that when she appears before the committee, I think she's favored in terms of responding to the queries that were put in the Auditor's General Report. So committees of Parliament, there's been that claim that some, but not all, because some members of Parliament are clean. Some members of Parliament are contented with what they're earning. But there are still those members of Parliament who have a lot of pressure from the constituencies. There are even those members of Parliament who are not even satisfied, who are not contented with what they're earning. They'll keep on going to these accounting officers to solicit for money. One, to kill the Parliament, to kill some of the committee reports. Sometimes to favor these witnesses when they appear before these parliamentary committees. And it has been there. And on a number of occasions, I've also seen some accounting officers appearing before these committees, and then you ask whether the questions members of Parliament asking them, those are the right questions or not. I've seen that because I've been reporting. Instead of being straight to the question, being straight to the query, exact query, they keep on
moving in circles,
not asking the right question. And I've also seen members of Parliament insisting, some committee chairpersons insisting by asking the right questions. So I cannot confirm now and say, because members of Parliament are not asking the right questions, some of them, it's because of they've been bribed or not. But it's a matter of investigation. In case the leadership of Parliament is necessary, then they can carry out investigations into that. Getting on the issue of the age limit debate, and then the lifting of the presidential term limit. During that time, 2005, I was not there. I was still at campus.
Yes.
But in 2017, I was there. And I saw with my eyes.
You saw money exchanging?
No, not money. With my eyes when they were passing the what?
The
bill.
Yeah.
And how some members of Parliament were even talking to us. Some of the judges, they say, Sansa has called me to go and pick 100 million. Sansa has told me to go and pick, such that I can change my mind. I don't know whether they went and picked, because if somebody is going to pick a bribe, cannot tell you that you come and escort me with your camera. I don't think so.
That is true.
So, there are those even opposition members of Parliament who were compromised, to be compromised during that age limit debate.
Just if you can recollect some facts, what was the voting tally in that particular bill? Where those who were in favor of the amendment, were they above the 300? I think they're above 300.
Yeah,
There were something like 300 something.
370.
370. So meaning that even some opposition and some independents voted in favor.
There's some opposition members of Parliament who voted in favor.
Yeah.
I remember.
All right, thank you. Joseph, as I get to you, is that clearly there is a trajectory of moral decadence in this. And as we evaluate Parliament today, I would appreciate if you give us some historical context to this, because I know that the UPC government, as they then passed the 1967 pigeonhole, 1967 pigeonhole, no, 66 rather, pigeonhole constitution, is that the circumstances that were surrounding Parliament were not very favorable for the MPs then to have free consent and to take decisions not being under any influence. So it looks like because corruption is not just money moving hands. It can be manifested in so many ways, direct or indirect. So as we fast track how we have found ourselves here today as a country, what is the historical narrative, but also your comments around Parliament today and corruption?
You have really spoiled my introduction by going to 1967 and insinuating another very important aspect of this NL regime's rogue records. If part of the suggestions was about 1967 pigeonhole constitution, which allegedly was pressurized, then you're not talking corruption. You're talking perhaps suggested intimidation, which I will defend that it did not apply. Because To suggest so is almost certainly to try and justify the mess and the criminality happening in the Legislative Assembly today. And to suggest so and to try and relate it or compare it to drag the cleanest government this country has ever had twice, UPC.
Okay, could you clarify?
I'm giving context. I'm giving context.
The events around 1966.
I'm giving context. And I don't see the direct relevance, but I was trying to do that to help your viewers. And so I was saying that, well, if then you were to bring 1966 nearest to it, to 67, nearest to the mess happening under NRA Legislative Assembly, then you could say, what about these people who invaded Parliament, in dark classes and broke into spaces that Kidega spoke about? That would be the relative comparison, not necessarily justified, but the relative. Here we are talking about corruption. It's a criminal thing. And look, I'm actually quite surprised by the extent. Of course, I've heard this, but come to think of it, I didn't actually know that the figures went as far as 100 million shillings. That's a lot of money for one individual. And I think Mr. Museveni one time will have to account.
But that's what we hear.
No, of course,
we cannot confirm.
All those allegations. All those
Mm.
allegations. And I can tell you Mr. Museveni will have to explain himself to the people of this country one time. But one thing is, because we gave this country to God, I hope that if he doesn't account with this country, he will have to account to God. Because, look, bribing legislators coming from the executive, is criminal. The 5 million shillings thing, when I had it, 2005, I just returned from exile from NRA. And I was trying to console myself that it may not be true, 5 million shillings. Because even then, at the time, that 5 million shillings was quite a lot of money. And number two, the idea that legislators would have to accept money in order to go and, and change their minds about voting. And that coming from me, who was very lucky, in a very unfortunate way, to find myself in exile in Britain, which happens to be with the Mother of Parliament, Westminster, and for which I've got friends today, and I lived some of my parliamentary experiences, and some of which I had offered my good brother, late Olanya, that I was available to help him to support, and I've said this before, to try and support some of the work in the Legislative Assembly here, from some of my own kind of experiences. To find a member of parliament in an average democracy, and I think as the introduction said, a member of parliament being compromised by the other wing, as I said actually 2 days ago, having a separate conversation about the media, that you have the executive, you have the legislature, you have the judiciary, and then you have the fourth estate, which is substantially undermined in the media. Extremely responsible role they do. They do this in order to make sure that while these checks and balances are there, nobody or no arm of government plays around with this thing. I don't know a circumstance under which I would see a member of parliament, say in Britain, being associated with a bribe. The nearest to bribes that ever came up was there was actually what they call, I think, cash for questions. Now some of the cash for questions, was it about a lobbying coming from an oil giant that invites you, and then they try and push you to push anti environment legislation because the population is talking about taxing heavy on fossil fuel, things like that. People actually consider that bribes. The nearest that is found acceptable is as lady legislators like my sister here, would come to Nagongera, organize and mobilize a group of young women. They meet and talk and things like that, prepare and arrange for her transport and things like that. And then they have conversations about the need for girl child education and things like that. That is acceptable. But money to exchange hands. But now here we're talking about money exchanging hands with the committee heads. Even to go to committee level, it is criminal. I want to say to Ugandans, it's actually criminal. Now back to what
influence a national policy.
Can you
policy
imagine?
Position. That is where it becomes.
So actually, possibly, let me actually upgrade it. It's actually treasonable. And when we see the things which is happening in Gabon, and I'll ask you the question. When you see the kind of things happening in Gabon, part of our problem is that just imagine that this rogue regime falls tomorrow. And then some sensible Ugandans wake up and begin to ask questions and put people to task and put Museveni to task and put some of his Mabati ministers to task. Then we begin to say this is witch hunting. It's wrong. And then I'm quite annoyed about it because our people are being taken so much for a ride. I've just come from upcountry. I go around the country. The other day I was in Teso. There is poverty in this country. Today, just before I was rushing here on air, I nearly left my jacket because it was hot. Why? Because I was stuck in traffic not far from here. A tiny little thing. And then you see the incompetencies. And then you see the potholes that even Museveni's son, who promised us 6 months ago that he would sort out Kampala. I don't know whether it's now going to put cow dungs to fill the gaps or not. I don't know. It is just terrible. And the problem is our citizens have now been taken so much for a ride that this conversation, maybe we're having to talk about it today and tomorrow is forgotten. But let me just, quickly tell you about
but
the
Museveni's son is not an engineer. How can he promise?
Where does he even get his budget?
The people who come that is going to fill the potholes.
Mr. Museveni promised in 1988, by then Moses was still young. So you can imagine how long Mr. Museveni has been around. So Moses was still not yet around then. I don't think, that he would mechanize the engineering department of his military, NRA, to do railways, and that is starting with the Kasese line, so that is going to mechanize, so that there's no need for these rail sleepers to come from China, wherever. And this is the infrastructure thing today. But anyway, it's not a diversion because it's still about important accountability element. The 1966 thing that you're referring to, I mean, the so-called pigeonhole constitution, these were drafts that were put into the pigeonholes of legislators as drafted. That was merely what was done. Now, there is these things about tanks. Nobody has shown us a picture of tanks or military things surrounding Parliament in Boo. The only reason that there would have been a heightened security presence around the Legislative Assembly, and I'm saying it for the first time today in an emphatic way, was simply because 1966-67, Uganda was under threat of a breakup. Buganda surrounding central government was clearly established and already, including with arms, and they've been found with arms anyway, preparing to overthrow the elected government of the time. So there was war. So it is in that state, that there was an increased security presence around the National Assembly. It was not to intimidate legislators, And then if you compare the manner in which these days one single member of parliament is surrounded by 20 people armed and angry, and if you go down the Legislative Assembly, your struggles to just go around the current parliament today. Just go around current parliament today, go through records, he's a journalist, go through Hansard and look through everything else and count the number of security agencies that used to be around the National Assembly. That gives you the context. And the reason why I'm emphasizing that is because I know, unfortunately, you're a victim, and so is possibly most other people, because this narrative has been pushed by Museveni on and on and on and on, and Ugandans have perfected it. No, the criminality which is taking place in Uganda today, has got nothing to do with the past. If anything, NRA guys will push that in order to try and wrap up people's things. Do you know what? The cleanest parliament was the first parliament of the Republic of Uganda. And we're just chatting with my sister here before we came to air. But come to think of it, these guys were not they're not many degree holders, but these guys had integrity. These guys had commitment. These guys had organization. And these guys, even with their own limitations, sought to plan and respect the different kind of arms of government and still worked as legislators, engaged their people, developed our communities, and worked to make sure that, at the end of the day, they're generally held accountable. In my constituency, the dispensaries, the health services that exist down there at every sub-country, when in Obote 1, the big hospitals, Obote 1 and part of, mainly part of Obote 1 and some of it extend to Idamini. The public schools were in Obote 1 and Obote 2. So no, I think it is worrying that, I know it's an introductory thing, it's a worry. My sister, in doing some of my rounds around the country, I started campaigning for consideration, ironically, for LC5s to be properly more remunerated, based on my experience with some of them, relative to how much legislators are given. So you're absolutely right. The amount of money that members of parliament get per month is amongst the highest remuneration in the country. So to consider that these guys would even think about going back to steal from the taxpayers, together with their chief executive, Mr. Museveni, or instruction Mr. Museveni, and to put Mr. Museveni on this issue because Museveni directly is responsible for this.
All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Honorable, as I come to you, is that one of the biggest opportunity for corruption to thrive in Parliament is the way the reports of the Auditor General is handled. I think for the past couple of years, we have seen what we call the omnibus bill, whereby the different reports by the Auditor General are considered at a go. I don't know, how has that approach towards looking at the report of the AG encouraged corruption? One. Two is that there is this African adage that the fish begins to rot from the top. What is the role of the speaker, the office of the speaker, in terms of either encouraging or discouraging corruption? Does the person occupying that office matter anyway, or it is a structural issue?
It is us who determine the kind of structure that we're going to have. That has always been the structure since Parliament was started in this country, since independence. So it goes back to the person, it goes back to the individuals holding the portfolio. Now, let me begin with
the structural issues that make someone, by the time they get to Parliament, they are looking forward to how can I recollect the money that I've lost in all these processes that I've been through. So that is where the structural social issues
even
come
then,
in. Yeah.
it is still the person. It is still the person, because come to think of it, all of us go through the same process. Why is it that when we arrive at that point, some of us don't do what others do? So it goes back to you, the person. Depends on the level of your integrity. Now, we cannot, I don't like a situation where we give ourselves the excuse and say, no, it is because of, the Adam syndrome. No, it is because of this woman. It was not me. It was because of the serpent. It was not me. No, you had your own capability to stand against whatever that has gone wrong. Now, it is my brother here say that, you see, we have a lot of pressures from the voters, and so we have to raise money for them. True, it is true that those pressures are there. But is it really those pressures that make people go out of their way to make money in wrong ways, to sell their conscience? Does that money, first of all go back to the voters? It doesn't. It doesn't. And, it is a whole conundrum that you don't know where to begin from. It is a circle. It has gone on round and round, from top to bottom, from all sides, all over. So we have to find a breaking point where we say, okay, we are going to begin from here and have this one corrected, and then we go to the other one, go to the next one, until we have gone all round and cleared up the situation. Because when you look at Parliament, for example, when the head of state begins to bribe the legislators. Now, the Constitution says all these three arms of government are supposed to be autonomous. They're supposed to be independent. They're supposed to check one another. None of them is supposed to influence the other. And the Constitution assumes that they work hand in hand. They believe in what the other one has decided or determined according to their role, and so they pick up from there and complete for the sake of Ugandans. But we find now that in Uganda, it is the executive that is running all these arms of government. The executive instructs the judiciary how to pass judgment. They instruct Parliament which bill to pass and which bill not to pass. And then we have gotten in other things there that have abused the whole system. In Parliament, for example, I remember during the age limit, we discussed and everybody was angry and saying, how come we know this man? That time was over. Then members were called to Chankwanzi. Oh, I don't know whether they went to Chankwanzi or they went to Entebbe State House. By the time they came from there, it's like we had not discussed anything. It's like nothing had been said. And guys came, they were like zombies. They went straight and they were voting. And you look at somebody's eyes and say, really? Yesterday we spoke and this is what came from your mouth. But today you are declaring something else. Someone would look at you like they don't understand what is going on. And then you get out of the chambers and they are confessing, my dear.
Yeah.
They think we're even doing this, but we are being watched. So people have been gripped with fear.
Okay, but
It doesn't matter what
Honorable,
level they are.
I want to understand this, and perhaps the viewer out there too. I don't know what possibly could have been told to these MPs in that Chankwanza sitting that makes them drastically change their position. Do they promise you? I don't know. Like, what do they tell? I'm trying to understand what exactly is told to them or given to them that makes them change completely and become a different person altogether.
First of all, it goes back to how did you come to that house? Some of them, it is the hand of the president or somebody around him that made them make their way to parliament. Some of them, they know that the ballots were ticked by the army so that they get to parliament. Otherwise, it was not voters of the voters that voted them in. So because they know how they came in, they know that they can easily be taken out. And besides that, of course, now the constitution doesn't provide for that. But the old man has a way he can take them out. He has,
Let me also give you some information. You remember in the 10th Parliament, when we are nearing the age limit debate, there was a member of Parliament from Igala East who was eliminated from the House by the court. So when I think I'd already made his position saying he will vote against what? The age limit. So when they went for the by-election, you remember what happened? The independent came. And even when the president went to Bushenyi to campaign for the NRM candidate, he said, I'm campaigning for this man, but I don't understand him well. You remember the statement the president was using? So at the end, the independent came, Honorable Mawanda came back to parliament.
And you know what their chairman does? He facilitates both of them. But then he will just speak a word. He knows that his word can be influential, especially in certain areas. When he says, there is a statement he used to make that I don't know this one. You mean even this one is a member of parliament? When he wants to degrade you before your people, he wants them to think that you are not known. It means that you don't know anything. You are not doing anything. You are not seen in the corridors of power or influence. So he comes and says, I don't know this one. I don't know. You mean this one is also a member of parliament? So people fear that kind of thing. But I know that he would go all the way to attack these people, work against them, undermine them, and even instruct his systems to get them out. Many of them have suffered. There's this lady, former woman MP of Kumi, Moding Monica. She was one of the most objective members in that house, and she was in NRM. But because she stood her ground on most of the things, they worked at her, they worked on her, they worked against her until she lost the election. It was purposed. And so, but
she even forced us. You remember when they went under projects before the president at Entebbe, as we were nearing the general elections? I think there's a group of.
She was among that group?
Yeah. She was among that group that went under projects before President Museveni for voting against the age limit.
Never forgives. That is what people need to know.
I thought he is a magnanimous.
No. He appears to be, but he doesn't. He doesn't forgive. President Museveni never forgives, and people must learn that. Once you've stood out for him, against what he desires, never think that at any one time you are going to his side and you think that he will work with you, but when he's looking for a way to eliminate you or to bring you down. For me, that is what I've seen. All the people that
tell
have
that
gone,
to some of our friends who are these days hanging around
that have previously worked against him and eventually have ended up in his arms. At the end of the day, you will not see them. Their careers are cut short. Sometimes even their lives. They lose their lives. So people need to learn to stand straight. And they like working with people who have skeletons in their cupboard. When you don't have skeletons, they will make sure that you have some, so that is what they hold you against. Now, I think I have digressed from the questions you asked.
Yeah, my question was around two things. the impact of omnibus bills, and two, does the person who holds, okay, how influential is the office of the speaker in terms of encouraging or discouraging corruption? Because the public was swept off its feet when they had a glance at the mansion of the Speaker of Parliament, and you know, questions were raised that I mean, how can someone have, you know, such a home? So those two questions, and just quickly before I move to Sam, we'll take a short
Now,
break. Yeah.
one of the ways that they have killed the efficacy of the accountability committees of Parliament is that system of omnibus presentation of reports. Now, when we are passing budgets, you pass a budget according to the institution. Each institution takes their budget and they have to account for it. That is why accounting officers have to appear before Parliament and plead their case and justify their budgets. So when you do it omnibus, you are denying Ugandans that opportunity to know how each individual entity is performing. And it is a way to cover up for wrongdoings in those entities. When one entity has done badly and has misused man, abused office, you cover them up among others. I think it is unconstitutional. It is ridiculous. It doesn't mean well for this country, because when money is given, somebody has to account for it. Now you are covering up the different accounting officers and you are not allowing Ugandans to interrogate how their taxpayers' money is being utilized in this country. It was a way to kill the accountability reports, because many times those reports, even we go beyond what the Auditor General has revealed. Sometimes we get the Auditor General's report and you really see it doesn't give you what you know. Because by the time the Auditor General's report comes, there are also whistleblowers who come and give you information. So you, as the chair or the member in that committee, you have more information than what the Auditor General has presented. Because the Auditor General also is not at liberty to say certain things, especially depending on who is concerned. So Ugandans are being duped already. Ugandans are all being duped because we have trusted these people with offices. We have given them authority to be an eye for us. Now, if they don't tell us that this person you have employed is a thief, better fire them. We continue being duped. We continue suffering. We are dying paying taxes, but we are not seeing the benefit of it. So it still goes back to the individual. That system was brought about, I think it started with Honorable Kidega.
Yes.
And that was because she just wanted to please. The other thing that it brings forth is like, you have passed so many reports. So you get content to say that, okay, we have presented 100 reports. But what is the detail of those reports?
Yeah.
What is it that has come out of those reports? You know, so it was a way that was brought to kill accountability committees, but also too, because the people who are working in some offices, you know, Uganda, everywhere there is a problem. But the way people are appointed, somebody is somewhere to protect them.
You know, Honorable, the funny thing about the whole omnibus bill is that the first mover of that motion was, in fact, the Honorable Nandala Mafabi. I someone who comes from the opposition side of things, who I would expect to be interested in accountability. So are you seeing, and I think that now feeds into my next question to Sam. But maybe if you could just you know, shed a light on that. I don't know. I would expect that because this person is from the opposition side, they would actually be interested in accountability. But they were the ones that moved the motion in 2018, around there. So I don't know. It's a bit of
there are
confusing.
sometimes selfish tendencies, but also I think that there is also this at the back of people's minds, especially legislators. Many of those that have been there for some time, they know that whatever members of parliament do, whatever parliament does, has no effect. It is of no consequence, because they say everything we decide, whatever resolution, it is advisory. So when you advise me, I have the prerogative to say I'm taking your advice or I'm not taking it, which is wrong. It is if it is in the constitution, it has to be corrected, because then you disempower the arm of government from the start. They have no authority at all. That's why they can't even follow up. There is a committee that is called It is supposed to see how much of the decisions of parliament have been implemented. But what does it do? It goes around and says, this has not been done, and then what? That's why they say parliament is toothless. It is a barking dog that does not bite, but it's supposed to bite. Parliament is supposed to recommend this PS should not be appointed ever again, and that should happen. Because if you are working as government, you are like a chain of a bicycle. If it is broken at a certain point, then government is not running. If government wants to run well, this chain must flow.
That's true.
But if it is broken at any one point, then you don't have a government.
Thank you. Sam, as we take a short commercial break, I'll just end with you. And my question is around multi-party dispensation. That because you have a parliament that has different political parties, does that in itself make it difficult to hold certain office bearers accountable? Take an example of the Mabati scandal. How the Committee on Presidential Affairs found it difficult to investigate or to bring to account certain officials, maybe because of the political party lines that were sort of not very, very clear. So do you think the mere fact that we're in a multi-party dispensation, that has it encouraged or it has enabled us curtail corruption? I don't know. How does it influence corruption in the House?
Moses, before I get to that question I've just asked, just allow me to submit briefly within 1 minute on the question asked Honorable Angelina Osege on the reports that are being adopted by Parliament in the omnibus way. I remember that day, Honorable Nandala Mafabi and then Honorable Meda Segona, the ones who moved that motion. Honorable Nandala and then Honorable Meda seconded the motion. I think the reason was that there were a number of reports that are not processed and that wanted to move to the next Parliament when all reports have been processed. So they came up with that motion and they adopted that motion. But like Honorable Angelina Osege said, sometimes the MPs that move motions based on their selfish interest and so on, because they don't give an opportunity to the taxpayers who are paying taxes, taxpayers who want to know what ministry so and so, how it has utilized the resources. So the argument was based on the fact that the reports were not processed, and there was a backlog of reports that are not being processed. Now, getting on the issue of the multi-party politics in Parliament. In 2005, when the multi-party politics came back, there were a number of reasons why we went back to have a country under multi-party politics. Now, we have seen in Parliament where politics also play a very vital role in determining the decisions or positions of some of the key recommendations Parliament is passing. And you said whether some of the political parties are playing a vital role in fighting corruption or not. On my own side, I think opposition is supposed to play a vital role in fighting and being at the forefront of fighting corruption. But today, you even ask some members of Parliament whether they're still opposition or they're in the ruling party. And you have been seeing them. Even when they invite the NRM caucus, they also want to go and attend the NRM caucus simply because they know that they will come back with a big envelope. The opposition, but they're also interested in attending the NRM parliamentary caucus. Do you know why? It's because of those brown envelopes, sometimes that are given, or the transport refund. So, if we're having opposition members of Parliament, like those ones, I don't want to say all of them, but like the few opposition members of Parliament who think they're in Parliament to get money, to make deals, then they will be undermining the multi-party politics in the country.
Because why I ask Sam is that the Honorable Jim Muhwezi and many others were censured from Parliament under the movement system. Today, it is as difficult as I don't know what to censure a minister. For I don't know, for whatever they will do, it is just difficult for Parliament to have that capacity to censure a minister, perhaps because, you know, they belong to the same house and the same home, and therefore they are sort of compromised on that particular regard and condition. So do you think that if we were still in a multi-party dispensation, we would have ministers who are more careful with how they handle taxpayers' issues?
But we have seen Minister Pastor Mugabi being censored in this parliament. I think you witnessed.
Over what? You see also.
You saw what happened.
But the ones who are being castigated for corruption are not being censured. Passis was actually.
It was a personal thing,
yeah.
not a personal relation.
Actually, I felt.
I was not saying whether she was guilty or not, but the issue is we have seen a minister being censored in this parliament. The grounds are totally. You remember the grounds that were based on to have her censored. Even if you are saying that they were personal or they were not personal. Being a journalist working in the parliament, I don't want to delve into that.
You don't want to lose your bread.
You know.
You see, that's our biggest problem.
You know.
Today. People don't want to lose their butter.
No, not losing the bread, but being a journalist, I'm supposed to be neutral on both sides.
No, but
I'm supposed.
No, you're supposed to be you're supposed to be independent and objective.
Yes.
So on the basis of facts and information you provide, because as a fourth estate, that's absolutely your responsibility. But I'm not going to put you on the spot on this. Rather, we are not putting you on the spot. But that is primarily what you need to do. Yeah. And of course, much earlier, I know we've got to go on break. Much earlier, part of what is being asked was, and I know maybe we'll discuss in the next section, what needs to be done. What needs to be done also start with ourselves, that all of us need to begin exemplary, to become exemplary, the four of us. Sure. And just as a matter of fact, as a matter of interest, the point about multipartism, as you say, I think that that's a cheeky question. I see it's stealing itself into the NRM narrative that opposition multipartism has spoiled polity. No, this thing is the fish from the head. Mr. Museveni and his NRA thing. Muhwezi and others are the cobbles or the untouchables of Mr. Museveni. At the moment, Mr. Museveni cannot afford to shake them. And it's in part because there is a presence of pro-supposed politics. In fact, if anything, it's in part because they know that if they shake some of these other guys, some of these guys are going to return to UPC and other political parties or form their own political organizations and move on. Number two. But number three, most importantly, a parliament is supposed to be a pluralist parliament anyway. Because just because Museveni came and broke political competition for 20 years, you know, and sold bad names about political parties and pluralism, all of which was a lie because it has no evidence. Someone said that was a lie, you have no evidence over it. You know, that tribalism and religious differences. You can now, the next time we're able to put Mr. Museveni on the cross, on trial, the guy would win Luzira 8 times. So it doesn't apply. No, I think Parliament should be pluralist, multi-parties. In fact, I've argued that I hope that going forward as an answer to many of these other things, we're going to be having less independence, but much more members of parliament representing established political parties. The issue is, how do we make these legislators much more accountable? I think, again, we were saying with my sister here at the beginning that maybe part of the problem is the beginning of the political processes. One of the reasons why legislators are well paid, it is supposed, is that they should be able to go and do their jobs properly on behalf of the citizens of this country. But again, also, we're again saying, you know, are these guys, by the time they go into parliament, are they going to parliament based on their convictionist values? Are they going to parliament because they know that they actually want to go and cause some changes? Or they're going there as part of the NRA thing of 40 years where we've killed the political parties and turned politics into personal merit thing about me, myself, and I, an individual, and attach it to money. So now livelihood, like my sister here was lamenting, is that where they say, even priests these days, you know, the issue is what is the need for me and how much money is it? That needs to be broken. For that to be broken, I think we shall conclude in a future segment that Mr. Museveni just needs to retire, a new sense of leadership needs to emerge, and we bang a table and we simply say that no, this country has had enough, we need a fresh start. And that fresh start can happen here. It happened in Tanzania with Magufuli. Just within about 3 years, you can bang a table, and I can tell you, when Museveni retires to Rashitura, I'll send him a cock, you know, for his dinner. And I can tell you the following day, Uganda's mindset will have changed.
Sam, allow me to give you a minute after the short commercial
It's
break.
okay.
Our time is fast spent. To the viewers, yes, there's a comment section right below this video. Give us your comments. Let's know what you think. But above all, stay with us and see you shortly after the commercial break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. We shall just continue from where we stopped. Yes, Sam, I had promised to give you extra 2 minutes to just your comments that I had posed a question to you, whether you think the movement system vis-a-vis the multi-party system has in fact enabled corruption to thrive in the August House. So just in a nutshell.
I don't want to confirm whether multi-party politics has helped in ensuring that corruption increases in the August House. But what I know, usually Parliament has adopted the way of working in caucuses. You see that whenever there is a contentious issue, this will go for the NRM caucus, like Honorable Angelina Osege said. But members of Parliament, sometimes they bring an issue, they debate an issue, and then when the time for voting comes, they first caucus. And by the time, because we have also seen members of Parliament, they deliberate and then you see somebody is very objective in his debate. But after the NRM caucus, you see somebody changing the colors. Even voting, somebody is fighting to vote in favor. Sometimes when the conscience is saying, I think you're supposed to vote against this motion. So it becomes a challenge. That's why Joseph was saying, with the time we'll see that independent members of Parliament will be very many in that August House, simply because the people want to speak their mind. The people who are objective, who don't want to see their conscience being what? Compromised. So in the due course, with the time, you'll see members of Parliament who are independent, the number increasing. And we've seen this. In the 9th Parliament, there were less than 50 members of Parliament who were independent. In the 10th Parliament, the number increased to 50-something. Today, there are over 70 members of Parliament who are independent legislators. The reason why is because sometimes people decide to go independent because they want to speak their mind when they're in the House. Others, of course, they come as independent simply because they have issues in their party politics and so on. But you will see majority of the sober members of Parliament usually decides to come as independent members of Parliament. And they don't even participate in their party primaries. They say, for me, I'm independent, I'll come as independent and I'll speak my mind when I get to the Parliament. Yeah. And the number is increasing. And I also want to tell you that in case parties don't handle the internal issues very well, the number will increase in the 12th Parliament. So those are some of the issues. But also, getting on the issue of caucuses, whether caucuses are good or not. Of course, those who are in leadership of these political parties, they will tell you, especially political parties with majority of the legislators, they will tell you caucuses are good because they help them sometimes to agree on some of the contentious issues. Because I've seen a number of controversies, even on the floor of Parliament, where members of Parliament, be it in the NRM, even those in the opposition, speaking for the interests of Ugandans. And then after 1 minute, after 2 minutes, after the caucus, they change their mind. And then you wonder whether they're pro-Ugandans or they're pro-NRM or pro-NUP or pro-FDC. But what I know, once somebody has been elected to the August House is supposed to be independent in his mind. Honorable Angelina Osege will tell you.
That is the ideal.
That's the ideal.
But realistically, at times the
so we need to
politics
examine why.
yeah.
We need to examine why. And whether these caucuses are playing, whether they're relevant to that day's politics.
All right, thank you. Joseph, as I get to you, is that the issue of supplementary budgets and the politics around, because I know there's a 3% window, but I think over time that window has been abused, all right? And we find ourselves having budgets that are supplementary way beyond the 3% window. I don't know, do we find ourselves exceeding that percentage out of necessity, or at times people are coerced, influenced to actually, do the things they do in terms of passing supplementary budgets?
By definition, any government that actually would think about supplementary budgets, and in many cases, every parliamentary session they go for supplementary budget, supplementaries, maybe try sometimes, sitting in the house, or perhaps you go for supplementaries 1 or 2 months after the budget, tells you that there is shambles at the top. So, I was on this particular program with a young legislator, interestingly from NRM, who tried to promise the citizens of Uganda that he was amongst those committed to seeking a review of the supplementaries, because he recognized that, as we do, that this is a process which is being abused by the executive. But that said, just quickly, something that I wanted to say much earlier.
Sure.
If only legislators, well-meaning legislators, could wake up to the reality of what I was saying at the beginning, so part of my early conversation with the late Jacob. If only legislators and the intending legislators could come to terms with the realities of the underlying issues of corruption and away from corruption, and that is the UPC's message of absence and death of public service by NRA. I think both of my colleagues have talked about it, the burden legislators face, particularly when it comes to voters. I think even you yourself talked about it. The truth is this, that members of parliament just need to make sure that I'm linking it to the course of budgeting process, that we have the budget commitment to Mr. Museveni and his family and Minister of Defense, we have it, and then we double that for education and health and infrastructure, and we shall begin talking. And that is, some of these guys get phone calls that demand for school fees. During UPC days, we were paying the Museveni's money. Don't you see? Museveni sometimes boasts that he was very, very rich. This guy became rich because of UPC, but he was particularly not very rich before he reached somewhere, before he went to entire school. So invest in education and invest in public education. Invest in public health. The other day I had, and I'm saying it on air for the first time, there was a fundraising doing the rounds for a medical doctor. I found it very, very, very sad that we've now reached a stage in which social media, we fundraise for a funeral, we fundraise for somebody's transportations to Ginger, you see somebody has got a particular health condition, and our public hospitals are there, and the following day, Mr. Museveni comes on television and he boasts. And another time, his son comes and promises, cow dung, carpet roads. And then the following day, my good, beautiful sister, Anita Mongi, gathers hundreds of legislators at her palace in Bukede, where I was in Bukede recently. And the palace looks, as if it's competing, with the last hospital UPC built, which is nearest to her place. These are the things. So I actually think that we need to be able to address question of public service in terms of education, transport, health, agriculture, underlying issues about unemployment. If legislators could get to that, the more we enable these guys, the less likely people are going to begin to chase them for these things. I generally believe it would help. So that then links to the question of supplementary. a supplementary budget should really be supplementary and emergency. No, and legislator here would explain, just like the good journalist friend of mine. What is wrong with these NRA guys, these guys who came with funny slippers from the bush, and they completely convinced, Ugandans that they were very clever, visionary, they call them intellectuals. You're an intellectual with what kind of head that do not plan? So what is it? Kasaija, economy, except Mabati behind you, behind your house. The fact that you're able to sit and plan for the nation, the idea is that you should do it in such a manner that, and basic accounting officer, I'm not, I don't know Angelina's background, what kind of an accounting officer is that? Perhaps even in our family. Moses, you're a fantastic student. For you do very well in terms of academia and everything else, and you do by then an excellent presenter. You do all this kind of thing. Surely you have an idea that, look, in this course of the week, I'll go 250,000 Uganda shillings, and know so much will take me for fuel, so much will take me for my lectures, and perhaps some exams are coming, and because NR has broken education, there's no guarantee that I will pay for, I'll go and photocopy in the library like the Ochienos would go ahead and do, but I'm going to go and do it down the road. So how much money do I need? I need about 300,000 shillings. So surely I should say that I have got a deficit with 400,000 shillings. What is this? It is telling you how this system is being run. It's being run like a family thing. Uganda is being run like an accident. I know I've deliberately not answered your question. The supplementary thing is one of the biggest shambles under NR regime. And it's actually a shame that there are professors. It's a shame that people with PhDs, and it's a shame that I begin to wonder, which schools they went to. I know they went to some of these new schools that are being built by Mabati money. But that should happen. That should not.
Someone went to Miri.
They went to. If you would have gone to Miri much later, when our Tata lorries of Miri hardly existed.
Yeah, but
no, I'm sorry, but
Joseph. Yeah, Honorable, as I get to you is that because if you look at the structure of Parliament, is that the accounting committees are supposed to be chaired by the opposition. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That PAC, quality assurance, all these committees are chaired by opposition. Someone who would imagine
that is PAC Central, we have PAC of government,
yes.
you have COSASE, you have Government Assurance Committee, all those.
That's the one I was looking for.
Yes.
There's even
Government Assurance
supposed to be,
Committee.
that is
In fact, you were even fighting, the opposition was also fighting to chair the Human Rights
Human
Committee.
rights.
Yes.
It's supposed to
But
be
now it's
accountability.
being chaired by NRA.
Yeah.
And then NRA is insisting. He said, we are the ones who are supposed to chair this committee.
Yeah,
but opposition says, I think for the opposition to check well the Human Rights violations, they need to chair that committee.
I agree with you on that. So, Honorable, I mean, all these committees are being chaired by the opposition. Someone who would imagine that, they would actually be very strict and say, we are going to hold the NRM government to account. I thought that is a blank check for them to actually hold the NRM accountable. Then how do we again find ourselves having corruption in committees that are being chaired by people who we suppose are there to check and to oppose the regime? I don't know, there is a bit of a mismatch.
Like I said earlier, there are many things that influence people's behavior at their place of work. First of all, Parliament or members of Parliament or those accountability committees are not implementers. Theirs is to raise issues, and the executive is supposed to implement. Now, this is an executive that cannot be advised, that cannot be corrected, that thinks they know it all. So they don't believe in anybody else pointing out an issue that would even make them better. If I was the president of this country, I would actually want accountability committees to work better. Why? Because when they point out weaknesses, I implement them. I am the one who takes the credit. But apparently, the government in power doesn't realize that. So instead, they want to kill these accountability committees. They want to weaken them. Let me tell you, these accountability committees, sometimes they even get discouraged. For example, you break your back working on something. There was a time we had a situation in the Bank of Uganda. Gerald Karahanga was my deputy, and we picked on it because essentially members of parliament are supposed to, if they hear about something, they have the prerogative to investigate it. That is when Kidega brought in something else that has, again, weakened further the accountability committees. She said you have to wait for the Auditor General's report. That is not constitutional. As members of parliament, when you see something going wrong in a department that you purview, you can look into it and produce a report and ask for people to account. But Honorable Kidega killed that as well. So you have to wait for the Auditor General's report. You have to wait for the report of IGG, and IGG reports are never even looked at.
And if you don't mind,
Incidentally.
just as a matter of interest, actually, and this may be on the question of committee, but as a matter of process, parliamentary processes, a legislator's power is actually normally powerful, meaning that perhaps you wake up in the morning and you're on your way to parliament and possibly something happens and you've got the prerogative to rise up on the floor of parliament and demand and point a finger at the minister. It's up to the minister, in this case, to run around with all the facts and figures and say that, look, you guys will either come back to you or check whatever. But that is basically, that's how powerful ideally this thing should be. And at the committee level, it's even much more, because committee level, by the time actually parliamentary committee chairpersons are actually as solid and as powerful as ministers. In other established democracies, some political leaders actually prefer to become parliamentary committee chairpersons, in part because of the relative authority, but in most importantly, all cases also a sense of independence. They feel that they actually want to do a lot much more governing.
You see, the rules of procedure provide that a committee of parliament has the powers of high court. That's why they can summon anybody. They can
Even
order
cause an arrest.
for their they can cause an arrest. And there is so much, but all that has been stifled. And ironically, it is Ugandans that suffer, because we don't get the benefit of our parliament. We don't get the purpose for which we sent representatives to the House of Representatives. We don't get the service that we need to get. We don't get the adequate service that we ought to get from the House, because instead of strengthening them, they are being weakened from all sides. Now, to say that they should be the ones, it is a blank check for them to, yes, I think I've answered that, because they have no power to implement. They would have, if we were working in a normal environment, if we are working in a serene environment, in a country that desires betterment for its citizens. Unfortunately, we are not. And so when these people try to work on what they work on, what is presented before them, it is actually, it is treated as they receive insults. They receive insults instead, and they receive threats. Let me tell you, I received threats, and I'm sure that some of the people that we investigated during my term participated in making sure that I don't come back to parliament. Because one time
They also invest in their opponents.
I sent away a permanent secretary with a box of money from my office. And members were saying, Honorable Chair, if you don't want, you just leave us. I said, no, let them come in your name. But if I get to hear about it, then I have issues with you. I'll deal with you. That is how powerful a chairperson of a committee is. You can get rid of a member of your committee who has been seen to go wayward. You can get rid of them. And that happened in my time. So, but the environment is not supporting these people. The environment is not supporting them. It is instead making them feel like they are the wrong people. They are doing the wrong thing. You try to hold someone accountable. I remember one particular permanent secretary, I don't know whether he passed on now. I think it was Ministry of Works or something. He had a sister who was a legislator. The sister was on my case. But the man had a bad report. The Auditor General had such a bad report of the man. He sat in my office up to midnight. By the time I left, I had to call CPS. They came and picked him. The parliamentary police picked him with the people of CPS, took him there. I said, you can come back to a meeting that will reschedule.
Did he continue to have his job?
We recommended that he should be fired. He was interdicted. But you know the way government interdicts PSs? They interdict you, put you on half salary, but you are still working. Now, you are being investigated for abuse of office. You are in the same office, influencing the same things, and you are earning money at the same time. So the punishment that we give to these wrongdoers is also not adequate.
And if you don't mind, I think maybe it's also again then part of the problem that you guys have. Meaning that if a PS, who's actually the highest civil servant in government, and in normal cases, the PS should be the ones who are trying to tell politicians, their political heads, that look, you guys, then you're crossing the line. They're doing this. So that actually shows how deeply rotten the whole system is. But if you don't mind, just another one for you, for maybe like what Moses is saying. Is it the case then that maybe some committee chairpersons may have much more difficult, like you seem to suggest, that you may be an opposition chair, but you've got a majority from the other side and they're pushing you? Those kind of influences, do they apply?
Yeah, there are situations because there is provision for minority report. And if you never produce a report as a committee, the blame comes to you as the chairperson. They said you are not working. So members can decide to sabotage you. And then they refuse to sign the report. Once you have the recommendations are, according to them, maybe not good, maybe they are harsh, they'll say, we will not sign that report. And so you cannot present the report to Parliament.
Let me also give you some information. Recently, we also got some reports that I think it was on Honorable Justin Kasule, who was telling members of Parliament during the induction, these current members of Parliament, was saying in the last Parliament, they had issues of where members of Parliament wanted to be paid first to append their signatures on the report. So it was also becoming a challenge on the side of the chairpersons. A chairperson takes a committee to a member to sign, or the clerk of the committee, and says, unless I'm paid, I cannot append my signature on your report.
Now, that depends on the kind of report. Now, a report that castigates government or an agency of government, you have mercenaries from that agency. A report that implicates government, you also have government trying to silence members or threaten them. So you see, there's this ministerial position which is still vacant. If you behave well, actually, the big man is looking at you. That is why, if you have never understood, there are positions in the executive that are vacant till to date. They are vacant completely throughout the term. Why? They are the carrot. They will come and say, you see, for you are looking, if you behave well, this one here, the old man actually was talking about you. And once you've done what they want you to do, and that is it.
Is that why we're told one waited for Robert Mao a bit?
I don't know. That is why now they have developed that approach of saying, pay us first. The NRM legislators demand for money from the president.
It's a deal house.
To sign certain things that the president is particularly interested in. They will say, pay us. Like during the age limit thing, they said, pay us because we know that once we pass the thing, we will not come back. The population is not going to return us. So how are we going to survive? You settle us. So when we sign, we know we have signed our death warrant. And that is what happens. In the election of the speaker and the deputy speaker, money exchanges hands. Something as what I would call as obvious as that one. Money has to exchange hands. For someone that the president is interested in to go through to a certain position. That is how rotten we have gone. That is how, and when you behave like that, there is nowhere you can go and raise your head with confidence and say, I am speaking without any fear of a shadow of doubt that anybody will raise any issue against me. Because in one way or the other, everybody has been made to have skeletons in their cupboard. And they are not keen to see that they are driving me into a hook. By the time you get there, then you realize, oh, now I'm hooked. You try to raise up your head, they wave this at you and say, don't you know we have this? If you try to misbehave, we have this. We will get at you. So many people have found themselves in situations that they can't get out from because they were driven there because of their maybe lust, maybe hunger, maybe poverty, but it is basically lack of integrity. I don't think I would sell my conscience for anything. At least I am glad to be one of those that has ever returned the monies. Whatever monies that came, it went back to wherever it came from. And today I can walk on the road, I can walk anywhere and say that I am here, you will have nothing against me. But when you have something, you can't. You'll be forced to go deeper. You go deeper each time because there's something against you.
Wow, interesting. Thank you. And how I wish we can have as many integral people in that house like yourself. Sam, there has been an argument that, and Honorable has indeed hit on it, the capacity and the effectiveness of these committees. Some people have said that at times they find themselves overloaded. And perhaps there is need for now subcommittees, that if we are to go into the nitty-gritties of looking at the reports of the Auditor General, word by word, holding officers accountable, then one committee of COSASE, it has to look at all these institutions of government.
100 entities.
When is it going to do that? So if we are to address issues of accountability and corruption, there are proposals that perhaps there is need for subcommittees so that some of these issues can be trickled down and handled at that level, then agreed upon at committee level. So I don't know, do you share that school of thought?
I think it depends on the chairperson and vice chairperson of that committee. I've seen some chairpersons forming subcommittees in order to handle this backlog that you're talking about. And I've also seen some chairpersons insisting that they're the ones who want to chair all committee meetings. So that's why I was saying it depends on the chairperson of a certain committee. Like Honorable Angelina Osege said, sometimes you may be, as a chairperson, whatever goes wrong in such a committee, it is the chairperson that is responsible. And in case there are rumors of solicitation of money and so on and so on and so on, it will be the chairperson responsible for whatever is going on in that committee. I've seen I've seen a committee that has started forming those subcommittees. That is the Public Accounts Committee of Government of recent, because they're supposed to handle all local governments across the country. Districts, the 10 cities, and also the municipalities. When you say it's only one committee that is going to handle all those entities, 146 entities, then you may spend a full year, Monday to Monday, meeting different entities. And remember that the queries are very many. You're not meeting an entity on one or two queries. The queries are very many. And you are meeting an entity almost for a full day. You can't even meet an entity for 2-3 days when you're still handling one entity. So the time may not be enough. So the proposal of having subcommittees is good. And there was also a proposal of establishing more accountability committees. But the challenge was also about issues related to money. When we talked about, I think she chaired that committee when it was still one committee back.
Yeah, it was divided at that time.
Now there are two committees. The one that is handling local governments and the one that is handling the ministries. But also getting on the issue of the corruption in the committees. On a level, I remember when she was chairing, she came out bold enough and said there's a member. She's the one who mentioned it, I remember, because I was the one covering that committee. And she said there's a member of parliament on that committee who went and approached the state accounting officer. I don't think whether you still remember that statement you made. I remember that day. So as long as you were a chairperson of a certain committee, you are the one who makes or breaks that committee.
Yes. Then my last question to you is that, as you make that point, could you add on this as well? Is that the public relies on the fourth estate to be able to cast a torch into the places where we cannot reach, like committees. So do you think that the fourth estate has also been victims of this corruption, and at times they find themselves not publishing or not covering the things that the public would have had interest in? And of course, you've done fantastic work in terms of covering certain, like very crucial incidents. But do you think that there's somewhere you've also been compromised a bit and see?
Of course, my being the president of journalists at Parliament, I'm supposed to defend my journalists. But the truth is, the instances where some accounting officers also approach get time and approach these journalists, not to make sure that they publish some negative things about them. But what we have also started is that some of us have started now broadcasting live. So whenever an event is going live, either on a certain radio station or TV station, there is no way you can avoid reporting about that incident that has happened in the committee. So it's one way of fighting that vice of compromising journalists. But like you were saying, journalists,
Also
like members of
human
parliament, those are human beings that they can be compromised in one or the other. If government has officials who are corrupt, then I cannot say journalists are perfect 100%. I'll be lying.
Yeah.
But I was finishing the other point of where I was saying, not only members of parliament are the one approaching accounting officers, there are even accounting officers who are approaching members of parliament because they want to retain their positions. Let me give you a good example. Recently, you saw one of the embattled executive director of a certain entity government. He came out and disclosed and said, I bribed the whole board with 100 million Ugandan shillings. And it was before committee. And he was confessing. Before committee of parliament, even after taking oath. He said, I bribed the board with 100 million shillings. So and so came in my office and picked the money, and the money was in a bag. So those are the kind of people that we're having. So as we are blaming members of parliament, as we are blaming journalists, but also the blame should also be apportioned to even some of these accounting officers because they influence.
Sure.
Sometimes even members of parliament could be there, and none of them is interested in approaching these accounting officers. But when they approach you with money, sometimes they're also tempted, as long as your integrity is questionable.
Wow.
So if you are to keep your integrity, do like Honorable Osege said. The accounting officer went to office with a bag of money and said, I don't want your money. But how many Angelina Oseges do we have? who can say, take away your money?
Not very many, I'm afraid. Our time is fast spent. So, Joseph, my last question to you, as I invite parting shots, is that the political will must be there. That for us to fight this vice, we must have political will at the leadership of Parliament. Do you think that Parliament, as it is today, the way you look at it, do you think they have the will politically to fight corruption out of Parliament?
They don't, because Parliament is just one element, as already been said. Parliament is one element, and it's worse because Parliament is headed by individuals who derive their powers from Mr. Museveni, the executive. Then you'll then go ahead and apply that to the judiciary and the rest of the unfortunate other arms of government. To the extent, therefore, that even the PSs, the permanent secretaries, are no longer predominantly qualified, decent public servants of the UPC days, where people will have risen on merit. Some of them have, but by and large, many of them they are there simply on the basis of the privilege of the good names they have with Mr. Museveni at the top. And finally, it cannot happen when the top is Mr. Museveni, who has got an office specially designed to make sure that he checks this. And for Mr. Museveni, the president, who's supposed to be allegedly fountain of honor, I don't like that word, goes out and simply says that he's got Parliament in his hooks, number one. Number two, he goes on to say, who are they? Meaning even actually some of these legislators, when they realize that whatever they do, they've come here, let them just do the best of what they can. Because at the end of the day, perhaps they're not going to change much. And at the end of the day, maybe what's at stake is so much, let me just go ahead and survive for tomorrow. I just want to say this. In 1982, early 82, a guy called Tiny Rollins, a journalist of London, this Anglo-American guy who's very much the front for imperial power in East and Southern Africa, came to Milton Obote. And he came to Milton Obote on advice, and it was arranged by Kaunda. And the trip was, because we've got the oil, Museveni says it's oil, but no, because we've got the oil, and also working on the pipelines to the coast, but also working on a big revival of both our coffee and cotton industry post. This coffee and cotton industry that Museveni has again killed. The idea then was for him to get the beige contracts on those two. So meeting in parliamentary buildings, in his office in parliamentary buildings, that were reluctantly accepted because he knew Tiny Roland the way. Rollins made the proposal, that he wanted to have monopoly of some kind of control, some kind of mini Pineti, of course not even Pineti, maybe slightly better than Pineti. Pineti is so dirty actually, but maybe better than Pineti, But Obote said no. Obote said that actually the proposal on the cotton industry thing, in principle, if worked in partnership with the government, was bound to be okay. So Obote said no. So Parliament Obote said no. Mr. Roland, no. Tiny Roland said, "Oh, Mr. President, this deal would be good for you and your government, meaning for the people in a particular way, but and for you and your ministers." Obote went berserk and said, Mr. Roland, I want you to repeat that. My country has suffered 9 years of dictatorship and terror. I'm struggling to reorganize my country, and I'm here. We are trying to replan and do this scheme, and you're here wanting to corrupt me. Use the word corrupt me with my young ministers. Do you get me? My young ministers. Obote threatened to call the Inspector General and get this guy deported and made personal aggression in this country. This country. You parliamentarians, watch this. Tiny Rollins left Kampala. This is breaking news for you. Left Kampala, went to Nairobi, jumped on his private jet, went to London, their home. From London, he made arrangements to go and meet Mr. Museveni in Sweden, where he was commanding the war on terror, war of terror against Ugandans. And since then, you hear about which kind of jets brought Museveni in 1986 here. Do you get it? Do you get it? So that was the president of Uganda People's Congress and the father of this country. And that is where you want it at. And in a way, that is where the curse is. That the Tiny Roland curse that Obote killed, went in and swept tick, 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 tick to Sweden, and you see where we are. No, this thing needs a complete new beginning. I don't think Mr. Museveni has got any capacity anymore, even in old age now, to say that he gets, what do these guys say, that when he gets delivered from the spirit of corruption and badness, it is possible he can. But he's so much surrounded by mafias that I don't think at this stage, where we are as a country, there is anything that even Mr. Museveni can do. It is that deep, meaning this country just needs a complete change. My hope is that when that change happens, I hope it is a UPC government in place, because that change will require genuine leadership. That change will also require a sense of responsibility. That means, therefore, one in which there's no revenge, and one in which, in that fresh start, we're able to remobilize our resources and make sure that the resources go to rebuild our country. You know that the railway that we picked from Soroti and took to Pakwach, Museveni has taken it and is now retreated, I don't know to where. So there is so much that needs to be done with the national resources. It's a shame that we're discussing corruption actually in Parliament, because Parliament should really be the last institution where we should be having this conversation. Of course, the judiciary, neither here nor there, but Parliament should be the last institution, particularly because parliamentarians are sufficiently reasonably remunerated to be able to cushion most of this temptation. Not all, but most of this temptation. Yeah. So, do I have hope that it will change under the system? My answer to you is no.
Is no. Honorable, your last words in a minute. Our time is fast spent.
I think we shouldn't lose hope. Human beings are human beings. They can change depending on who is showing them the way to change. I really believe even what we are lamenting about Parliament, if we had showed a different behavior from the apex of this country, they would not have the nerve. Parliament would not have the nerve to do anything contrary. Parliament is only following the footsteps of their father. So, but there are still Ugandans who mean well for this country. Yeah. There are still Ugandans who can do better. And I believe, given a chance, this country will come back to what it ought to be. All I want to say is that all Ugandans out there, don't give up, because I notice many Ugandans are now laid back. They are waiting for nature to take its course. They are waiting for God to come and help them. But God will not come and help them except you rise up. God will wait for us to rise up, and then he will empower us to help ourselves. There's still hope. There's still hope.
There's still hope. Yes, Sam.
There is still
Hopelessness,
hope.
no, hopelessness,
No,
hope.
no hopelessness under NRA. The
Where are you
future.
from?
Let me just say that the future of this country. Because I don't want to miss it. The future of this country is so great.
Yeah.
It just belongs in the hands of young Ugandans. And as my sister said, they just need to come up, take positions, and run with it. But in terms of Museveni taking them anywhere, that is the hope that I say it doesn't exist.
7 is a god.
Yes, sir.
I'm happy that I've seen President Museveni coming out to castigate some members of parliament over this very issue of corruption. I saw him in Kololo during the State of the Nation address when he was warning members of parliament about this vice of corruption. But what is remaining now is to see him act. And if he acts, maybe in future we may see a corrupt-free what?
How many times has this?
Institution. And I've
Walk
also
the talk.
seen this very last week, the speaker also coming out, warning members of parliament, especially these members of parliament in these committees, also to drive with this vice of corruption. Let me hope they will listen to the voice of both the speaker and the president. Thank you.
We also hope so. Thank you very much, Honorable, for your time. Thank you, Congressman. We hope that UPC can handle its internal issues.
We will.
Thank you very much from the 4th Estate, Sam Ibanda Mugabi. Well, to the viewers, thank you for making a date with us this Saturday morning. And, until next week, same time, bye-bye. But just a last word from me is that this country is possible. It is possible. Whatever we imagine in this country is possible. A country where the economy is thriving, where there is, democracy and all these good things. It is possible, but it takes me and you to make it possible. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.